She watched the housekeeper pack her belongings through tears, and Amelia Whitemore smiled. For 7 years, this millionaire's wife had ruled her Boston mansion like a tyrant queen, destroying anyone who dared to challenge her authority. The staff whispered her name with dread. Nobody fought back. Nobody even tried. Until the day a 28-year-old maid with nothing left to lose walked through those gilded doors and discovered the one thing Amelia feared more than anything else. This is the true story of how courage defeated cruelty, not with violence or revenge, but with something far more powerful. And I promise you, by the end of the story, you'll never look at power the same way again. This is a story about justice. No, it's about something even deeper than that. Stay with me if this story is pulling your heart. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story about power, secrets, and what happens when someone finally refuses to be broken. On Beacon Hill in Boston, there stood a mansion called Whitemore Estate. Not just any mansion. Mind you, this was the kind of place where the marble floors alone cost more than most people's houses. 3 stories of Georgian architecture rose, like a monument to wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung in every room. The gardens were manicured by a team of 6. Even the air inside felt expensive, heavy with the scent of imported flowers and old money. And in this world of silk and shadows, there was one name that made everyone tremble: Amelia Whitemore. She was the wife of Collins Whitemore, a real estate developer who owned half the luxury properties in New England. His money built empires that stretched across the city skyline. But Amelia, she built something different within the walls of their home. She built an empire of fear. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., she would descend the grand staircase, always dressed as if attending a society gala. Designer dresses that cost 5 figures, hair styled to perfection, jewelry that caught the morning light like shards of ice. And always ready to destroy someone's day if they dared to displease her. The staff would literally hold their breath when they heard her heels clicking on the marble. They'd seen what she could do. There was Maria, a housekeeper who'd worked there for 3 years, fired on the spot for leaving a single water spot on a crystal glass. Amelia hadn't just dismissed her. She'd made Maria stand in the foyer while she called the staffing agency, describing her as incompetent and lazy within earshot. The woman had left in tears, her hands shaking so badly she could barely carry her belongings. There was James, the head gardener, forced to his knees in front of the entire outdoor staff because a rose bush had developed a single brown leaf. Amelia had stood over him, arms crossed, watching him apologize again and again until his voice broke. And according to everyone who witnessed it, she'd smiled. That's the kind of woman Amelia Whitemore was. Now, into this world of polished cruelty walked a woman named Rachel Brown. Rachel was 28 years old, and 6 months ago, her life had taken a turn she never could have imagined. She'd been so close to finishing her master's degree in social psychology at Boston University, writing a thesis on power dynamics and institutional abuse. She loved that work. She was brilliant at it, too, finding patterns others missed, understanding the psychology behind why some people wielded power like a weapon. But then her mother fell ill, stage 3 cancer. The medical bills came like an avalanche, burying everything Rachel had worked for. She had to make an impossible choice: finish her degree or save her mother's home from foreclosure. She chose her mother. She would always choose her mother. So there she stood on her first morning, smoothing the crisp black dress and white apron of a maid's uniform, staring at her reflection in the servants' quarters mirror, feeling like she'd stepped through a portal into a different century. But here's what Amelia Whitemore didn't know about her newest employee. Rachel had spent 3 years studying people exactly like her, and she'd learned something crucial during all that research. Bullies follow patterns. They reveal themselves if you know how to watch. On that first day, an older maid named Grace pulled Rachel aside in the servants' quarters, a small, cramped room that smelled of cleaning supplies and years of quiet suffering. Grace had worked at the Whitemore mansion for 7 years. Every one of those years showed in the lines around her eyes, in the way her shoulders curved forward as if perpetually bracing for impact. "See that woman?" Grace whispered, gesturing to the doorway toward the dining room. where Amelia sat reading society magazines, her posture perfect, her face a mask of aristocratic boredom. Mrs. Whitemore doesn't see us as people. We're objects to her, things she can break when she's bored. Rachel felt her stomach knot. Is she really that cruel? Grace's laugh was bitter, hollow. Last month, she accused Thomas, our chef, of stealing silverware. She had absolutely no proof, just wanted to see him beg for his job. He has 3 children. She knew that. She knew that. Grace's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She smiled while he begged. Rachel felt something familiar ignite in her chest. The same fire that had driven her academic research. The same burning need to understand why some people chose cruelty when they could have chosen kindness. Where's Mr. Whitemore in all this? Collins. Grace shook her head slowly. He's hardly ever here. Business trips, board meetings, charity galas. Anything to stay away. When he is home, he locks himself in his study. I think. She paused, glancing around to make sure they were alone. I think he's afraid of her too. That evening, Rachel observed Amelia during dinner service. The woman sent back her soup 3 times. First too hot, then too cold, finally lacking proper seasoning. Each time, she would deliver a cutting remark to the staff member who brought the replacement. But Rachel noticed something crucial that everyone else seemed to miss. Amelia's eyes. They tracked the room constantly, checking to see who was watching, measuring who looked intimidated, who flinched at her voice. She was performing. This wasn't random cruelty born of bad moods or genuine dissatisfaction. This was calculated, strategic, deliberate. Amelia needed an audience for her power to exist. Without witnesses to her dominance, what was she? And that's when Rachel decided to look deeper. During her breaks over following days, while the other staff rested their aching feet or grabbed quick meals, Rachel began to research. Not about the Whitemore's current life. That was all over society pages and charity event photographs. No, Rachel wanted to know about Amelia's past. About who this woman had been before she became the terror of Beacon Hill. The official story was elegant and simple. Amelia Lancaster from a distinguished Philadelphia family. Charity work since her teenage years. Private schools, impeccable breeding. The perfect match for a man like Collins Whitemore. But Rachel's thesis research had taught her something important. The most carefully constructed stories are often the ones hiding the deepest secrets. She knew how to find what people wanted buried. And Amelia Whitemore, Rachel suspected, had buried something very deep indeed. Late at night in her small room, Rachel pulled out her laptop and started searching. Social media profiles, society page archives, charity event photographs. Amelia's digital footprint was extensive. There she was at galas, at fundraisers, cutting ribbons at museum openings. Always perfectly composed, always playing the role of the sophisticated patron. But something was off. Rachel noticed it on the 3rd night of searching. Every single record, every photograph, every mention of Amelia Lancaster only went back 8 years. 8 years exactly. Right to the month she'd married Collins Whitemore. Before that, nothing. No childhood photos. No high school yearbook images. No college records. For a woman supposedly from a distinguished Philadelphia family with generations of society connections, Amelia Lancaster had somehow existed in a complete vacuum until the day she said, "I do." That's not how old money works. Rachel knew that. Old money families document everything. Weddings, christenings, debutante balls. They're obsessed with lineage, with proving their place in the social hierarchy. Yet Amelia's supposed illustrious past was a complete blank. Rachel's heart started beating faster. She knew this pattern. She'd seen it in her research on people who reinvent themselves, who construct new identities to escape old ones. She expanded her search, diving into public records databases, court filings, anything that might require legal documentation. And then, buried in a Massachusetts court database, she found it. A name change petition filed 9 years ago. Petition for legal name change. Amy Lou Martin to Amelia Lancaster. Reason, personal preference. Rachel stared at the screen, her hands trembling slightly. Amy Lou Martin. That was the real name. The name before the transformation, before the designer dresses and the affected accent and the Reign of Terror. She typed the name into the search bar, Amy Lou Martin, Boston, and the results that came back painted a picture so different from the woman who descended that grand staircase every morning that Rachel almost couldn't believe she was looking at the same person. Almost. But as she clicked through link after link, newspaper archives and old blog posts and forgotten social media profiles, one truth became crystal clear. Amelia Whitemore wasn't born into privilege. She clawed her way toward it, and she'd been willing to destroy anyone who reminded her of where she'd really come from. Rachel sat back in her chair, her mind racing. This was it. This was the key to understanding everything. The cruelty, the performance, the desperate need to dominate everyone around her. Amelia Whitemore was terrified. Terrified that someone would see through the costume she wore every single day. And now Rachel had found the woman beneath the mask. Rachel spent the next week watching Amelia with new eyes, not as a servant watching her employer, but as a researcher observing a subject. And the more she watched, the clearer the pattern became. During staff breaks in the cramped servants' quarters, Rachel listened to stories that went back years. There was a sommelier who'd been insulted and dismissed after suggesting an Italian wine pairing for a French meal. Amelia had called him pretentious and overstepping his station, even though he'd been hired specifically for his expertise. There was a hostess who'd been made to change her lipstick mid-service during a dinner party because Amelia decided the shade was too bold and inappropriate for someone in her position. The woman had cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes, her hands shaking as she wiped away the offending color. Rachel noticed something crucial in these stories. Amelia's rage wasn't random. It followed a specific pattern. She attacked anyone who demonstrated knowledge or sophistication that might outshine her own carefully constructed image. The sommelier knew more about wine. The hostess looked too confident, too polished. These weren't threats to Amelia's authority. They were threats to her performance. Because that's what it was, a performance. Amelia was obsessed with playing one specific role, the sophisticated, cultured, old-money wife who'd been born into this world of wealth and privilege. And any crack in that performance triggered absolute rage. Rachel realized something that made her pulse quicken. Amelia wasn't confident at all. She was terrified. Terrified that someone would see through the act. That someone would realize she didn't belong in this world she'd fought so hard to enter. Now, armed with the name Amy Lou Martin, Rachel went deeper. She started with social media archives, old Facebook and Instagram posts from nearly a decade ago. The name brought up a profile, privacy settings loose, the way everyone's had been back then. And there she was, Amy Martin, early 20s, heavy makeup, tight dresses, posing in nightclub bathrooms with friends whose smiles were bright but whose eyes looked tired. The captions were littered with misspellings and slang that would make the current Amelia Whitemore physically recoil. Rachel found employment records next. Amy Lou Martin had worked bottle service at 3 different downtown Boston nightclubs between the ages of 21 and 24. Not hostess positions at upscale establishments. Bottle service at the kind of clubs where the music was deafening and the clientele was there to get drunk, not to be seen. Then Rachel found the Boston Globe article. It was from 9 years ago, a piece about nightclub safety regulations. In the background of one photograph, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, stood a young woman serving drinks. The caption listed the employees present, including server Amy Martin. The bone structure was unmistakable. The eyes were the same. It was Amelia, but everything else about her was different. The Amy Martin in that photograph looked nothing like the woman who descended the Whitemore staircase every morning. This woman looked hungry, desperate, like she was serving drinks while watching a world she could never enter. Until somehow she did. Rachel kept digging, and what she found next made her blood run cold. A blog post from a former nightclub worker talking about toxic workplace environments. One passage mentioned Amy M., specifically describing her as having an explosive temper and being desperate to move up. There was an incident, the blogger wrote. Amy had been fired after physically attacking another employee over a dispute about tips. Rachel sat back, her mind racing. She was starting to understand. Amelia Whitemore hadn't been born into cruelty. She'd learned it. refined it, weaponized it, and now Rachel knew why. The full picture of Amy Lou Martin emerged piece by piece, like a photograph developing in chemicals. Public records showed she'd been born in South Boston. Not the gentrified South Boston today, but the working-class neighborhood of construction workers and corner stores. Her father had worked construction for 30 years. Her mother had been a clerk at a local grocery chain. Solid, honest people living paycheck to paycheck. Amy had attended community college for one semester before dropping out. No scandal, no dramatic exit. She'd simply stopped showing up to classes and started working the nightclub circuit instead. Rachel found more employment records. Amy had bounced between 3 different clubs over the span of 3 years, never staying anywhere longer than 8 months. Each departure seemed to follow some kind of incident, though the details were vague in the official records. Then Rachel found a video. It was buried on an old file-sharing site, the kind people had used before everything moved to YouTube and social media. The quality was terrible, shot on an early smartphone, all grainy pixels and blown-out lighting. But the content was crystal clear. A young woman in her early 20s stood in what looked like a nightclub back room. Heavy makeup smeared down her face, hair disheveled. She was screaming, absolutely screaming, at someone off camera, her voice hoarse with rage. "You think you're better than me? You think you can just take what's mine?" She grabbed bottles from a shelf and started throwing them. Glass shattered against walls. Her hands were shaking with fury. The profanities that poured from her mouth would have made a sailor blush. But it was the accent that stopped Rachel cold. Thick, unmistakable South Boston. The kind of accent that Amelia Whitemore had spent years erasing, replacing it with the careful, measured tones of old money in private schools. This was Amy Martin in her rawest form. No polish, no performance, just pure, desperate rage. Rachel watched the video 3 times, her heart pounding. This was the real woman beneath the designer dresses, an effective refinement. This was who Amelia Whitemore had been before she'd learned to weaponize sophistication instead of bottles. The incident report Rachel found next filled in the details. Amy Martin had been fired after physically attacking a co-worker over a tips dispute. Security had to pull her off the other woman. She'd been escorted from the building and told never to return. 6 months later, Amy Lou Martin legally changed her name to Amelia Lancaster. A year after that, she married Collins Whitemore at a small, private ceremony. No family present, according to Society page announcement. Rachel sat in her small room, the laptop screen casting blue light across her face, and everything suddenly made sense. Amelia's cruelty wasn't random. It was targeted, strategic. Every time she humiliated a server, every time she made a housekeeper cry, every time she reduced someone to begging, she was trying to destroy any reminder of who she really was. The staff weren't people to her. They were mirrors reflecting a past she'd spent years trying to escape, and she hated them for it. Everything about Amelia Whitemore was constructed. The name, the background, the accent, the manners, the cruelty disguised as aristocratic standards. All of it learned, performed, desperate. She clawed her way out of South Boston and into Beacon Hill, and she was terrified, absolutely terrified, that someone would figure out, that someone would see Amy Martin beneath the Amelia Whitemore costume. Rachel closed her laptop and sat in the darkness of her room. She now held Amelia's deepest secret. The question was, what would she do with it? 3 weeks later, the Whitemore mansion was prepared for a dinner party. Collins was hosting business associates, real estate developers, investment bankers, the kind of people who made decisions worth millions over dessert and wine. Rachel moved through the evening with practiced efficiency, serving champagne to guests in the grand dining room. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier above. Conversations hummed with the comfortable arrogance of wealth. Everything was perfect. Then Amelia's voice cut through the room like glass shattering. "You, the new girl, come here." The conversations didn't stop immediately, but they faltered, dimmed. The guests sensed something, entertainment perhaps, a show about to begin. Rachel walked toward Amelia, her tray balanced perfectly, her expression neutral. She could feel every eye in the room tracking her movement. Amelia stood near the fireplace, her posture perfect, her smile sharp. Is there something wrong with your training? Because you've been serving from the wrong side all evening. Rachel knew this was a lie. She'd been trained properly, and she'd been serving correctly. But that wasn't the point. This wasn't about service standards. This was a test. I apologize if I made an error, Mrs. Whitemore, Rachel said calmly, her voice steady and professional. Amelia's smile widened. She turned slightly, addressing the room now, performing for her audience. You've embarrassed me in front of my guests. You've made me look like I hire incompetent help. She took a step closer to Rachel, her voice dropping to something that sounded like concern but dripped with condescension. Perhaps you should remember your place in this house. You're here to serve, not to stand around making cow eyes at people who are far above your station. The words were designed to cut, to humiliate, to make Rachel feel small and worthless in front of all these powerful people. But Rachel had spent 3 years studying people like Amelia. She understood what this was, a performance of dominance. Amelia needed Rachel to cry, to flinch, to break. That's how her power worked, through fear, through the public demonstration that she could destroy anyone anytime. So Rachel did something Amelia didn't expect. She held Amelia's gaze with calm, unwavering confidence. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't show even a flicker of the emotion Amelia was desperately trying to provoke. I understand, Mrs. Whitemore, Rachel said quietly. If you'll excuse me, I'll return to my duties. She turned and walked back toward the kitchen, her steps measured and composed, not rushing, not fleeing, just walking with quiet dignity while the entire room watched. Behind her, she heard the moment, that fraction of a second, where Amelia's performance faltered, where the script didn't go as planned, where the bully's favorite weapon failed to land. In the kitchen, Grace grabbed Rachel's arm, her eyes wide. What did you do? I thought she was going to fire you on the spot. Rachel set down her tray, her hands perfectly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She wanted me to cry. When I didn't, she lost. Grace shook her head in disbelief. No one's ever just walked away like that. She needs us to be afraid, Rachel said quietly. Without that fear, what power does she really have? Over following days, Amelia tried again, and again, each attempt more desperate than the last. And with each failure provoke a reaction, Amelia's mask began to slip. Over the next 2 weeks, Amelia began summoning Rachel constantly, multiple times a day for invented infractions that grew more absurd with each passing hour. A picture frame hadn't been dusted properly, even though Rachel could see her own reflection in the glass. A bathroom mirror had a streak, one that appeared only when Amelia tilted her head at a specific angle in specific lighting. The flowers in the guest room weren't fresh enough, despite being replaced that very morning. Each summons came with carefully designed insults, calculated to wound based on class and education. I suppose this is the best someone like you can do, Amelia said while inspecting the supposedly dusty picture frame, her voice dripping with aristocratic disdain. Another time. Did you even graduate high school? Because this level of work suggests otherwise. And Rachel's personal favorite. You're lucky I give people like you opportunities. Most women in your position would be grateful. But Rachel remained calm, professional, unbreakable. I'll correct that immediately, Mrs. Whitemore. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Mrs. Whitemore. Of course, Mrs. Whitemore. Each composed response seemed to fuel Amelia's frustration. Her mask was cracking. The performance was becoming desperate. Staff members whispered about it during breaks. Mrs. Whitemore was losing control, and everyone could see it. One evening, after a particularly cruel dismissal over a microscopic wrinkle in a tablecloth, Rachel was walking back through the hallway when she nearly collided with Collins Whitemore. He steadied her with a gentle hand, then stepped back, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry about my wife, he said quietly, glancing toward the dining room where Amelia's voice could be heard berating another staff member. She has a lot of pressure. Rachel studied the man before her. Mid-50s, expensive suit, tired eyes. A man who'd built an empire, but couldn't control his own home. Mr. Whitemore, may I ask you something? He looked surprised but nodded. Rachel kept her voice soft but direct. "Have you ever tried to stop her?" The silence that followed was deafening. Collins's face showed everything: shame, resignation, years of choosing comfort over courage. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked away. "It's complicated," he finally said. "Is it?" Rachel asked, her tone not accusatory, but genuinely curious. "Or is it just easy to look away?" Collins flinched as if she'd physically struck him. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of his own cowardice. But then it died, replaced by the weary acceptance of a man who'd made his choice long ago. He walked away without answering, his shoulders slumped, disappearing into his study, like a prisoner returning to his cell. Rachel watched him go, understanding something crucial. Collins Whitemore was as trapped in this house as any of the staff. He'd simply chosen a more comfortable prison. That night, Rachel lay in her small room, knowing what was coming. She'd studied this pattern in her research. Bullies escalate when their tactics fail. They become more aggressive, more desperate, more dangerous. Amelia's public performances weren't working. Her daily humiliations weren't breaking Rachel's composure. So she would have to try something else, something more direct. The confrontation was coming. Rachel could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon, and when it arrived, she would be ready. 2 weeks after the dinner party incident, Rachel received a summons to Amelia's private sitting room on the 2nd floor. The pretense was thin, discussing household duties. Rachel climbed the stairs, her heart steady despite knowing exactly what this was. The moment she'd been anticipating. The storm finally making landfall. She knocked once and entered. Amelia stood by the tall window overlooking the gardens, her posture rigid with barely contained rage. She didn't turn around immediately, letting the silence stretch like a wire pulled taut. "Close the door," Amelia said finally, her voice cold and controlled. Rachel complied, the soft click of the latch echoing in the elegant room. She stood just inside the doorway, hands folded calmly in front of her, waiting. Amelia turned slowly, her expression a carefully constructed mask of aristocratic disdain. "I've had you investigated." There it was, the opening move. Amelia walked closer, each step measured and deliberate. Her eyes locked on Rachel's face, searching for the fear she was so desperate to find. "I know about your mother's medical debts, the foreclosure threats, the bills piling up faster than you can pay them." Another step closer. "I know about your unfinished degree, your abandoned thesis. All those years of work, gone, wasted." Her voice dropped to something that sounded almost sympathetic, but the cruelty underneath was unmistakable. "I know how desperate you are, Rachel. How much you need this job. How little you can afford to lose it." She was standing directly in front of Rachel now, close enough that Rachel could smell her expensive perfume, could see the carefully applied makeup that created the illusion of effortless beauty. "I could make one phone call," Amelia continued, her voice deadly quiet, "and ensure you never work in this city again. Not in any capacity. I know people, important people, people who owe me favors." The threats kept coming, each one more specific than the last. Contacting collection agencies about Rachel's mother's debts, calling Boston University to ensure Rachel never finish her degree, spreading rumors that would follow her to every job interview, every opportunity, every chance at rebuilding her life. "So here's what's going to happen," Amelia said, her smile sharp and victorious. "You have 2 choices. You can leave today with a month's severance and a neutral reference. Or you can stay, and I will systematically destroy what's left of your life. Your choice." She stepped back, arms crossed, waiting for Rachel to crumble, waiting for the tears, the begging, the desperate apologies. This was her favorite moment, the moment when her victims finally understood how powerless they truly were. But Rachel didn't flinch. She met Amelia's eyes and saw not power, but terror. This woman's entire existence depended on people being afraid of her. Without that fear, she was nothing, just a frightened woman in an expensive costume, desperately performing a role she'd never been cast for. Rachel took a slow, steady breath. "I have a different suggestion, Mrs. Whitemore." she said calmly, her voice clear and unwavering. Or should I say, Ms. Martin? The blood drained from Amelia's face. Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time in 7 years, the terror of Beacon Hill looked absolutely terrified. The blood drained from Amelia's face. Her breath caught in her throat, her eyes going wide with something that looked like panic. I don't know what you... Amy Lou Martin, Rachel said quietly, each word landing like a hammer. From South Boston. Construction worker father. Grocery clerk mother. Community college dropout. Amelia took a step back, her hand reaching for the chair behind her. Bottle service at downtown nightclubs, Rachel continued, her voice steady and calm. 3 different clubs over 3 years. Fired from the last one for assaulting a co-worker over a tips dispute. Stop. Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. I've seen the video, Amy. The one where you're throwing bottles and screaming in an accent that sounds nothing like the one you use now. The one where you look and sound like the person you really are. Amelia stumbled backward, gripping the chair for support. The powerful woman who'd terrorized this household for 7 years was crumbling before Rachel's eyes. Her carefully constructed mask was cracking, falling away piece by piece. Your entire life is a construction, Rachel said, not cruelly, but with the clinical precision of someone presenting research findings. The name, the background, the accent, the manners, all of it learned, performed, desperate. She took a step closer, and Amelia actually flinched. You spent years terrorizing people who remind you of who you really are, Rachel continued. Every server you humiliate, every housekeeper you make cry, every staff member you force to their knees. Their mirrors reflecting Amy Martin back at you, and you hate them for it. You have no proof, Amelia said, but her voice was shaking, the aristocratic accent slipping slightly, revealing the South Boston underneath. Court records of your name change, Rachel said calmly. Boston Globe photograph with your real name in the caption, the nightclub video, employment records, blog posts from former co-workers, and a nearly completed master's thesis on power dynamics and institutional abuse that taught me exactly how to find what people want to hide. Amelia sank into the chair, her perfect posture collapsing. She looked smaller somehow, as if the revelation had physically diminished her. Here's what's going to happen, Rachel said, her voice firm but not unkind. You're going to stop. No more cruelty. No more humiliation. No more destroying people for your own entertainment. She paused, making sure Amelia was listening. You're going to treat every person in this house with basic human dignity. Not because they're beneath you, but because they're not. They never were. And if I don't, Amelia asked, her voice barely audible, then Collins learns the truth about who he really married. Rachel said simply, your society friends see the video of you throwing bottles and screaming profanities. The Boston Globe runs a Where Are They Now piece about Amy Martin from South Boston. Every person at every gala, every charity event, every society function learns that Amelia Whitemore is just Amy Martin wearing a costume that doesn't fit. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Amelia sat in her expensive chair, surrounded by her expensive things, in her expensive mansion, and she looked like exactly what she was, a frightened woman whose worst nightmare had materialized. Not exposure to the world, Rachel realized, but exposure to herself. After 7 years of running from Amy Martin, Amelia Whitemore had finally been caught. For a long moment, Amelia said nothing. Then, through tears that smeared her perfect makeup, she whispered, I built this life. I worked so hard to escape who I was. Rachel felt something unexpected. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition of the tragedy in front of her. By becoming someone worse, she said quietly, you could have escaped your past with kindness. Instead, you weaponized your new position against people who couldn't fight back. Amelia looked up, mascara running down her cheeks, and for the first time, Rachel saw Amy Martin clearly. Not the monster, not the tyrant, just a scared woman who'd made terrible choices trying to outrun herself. Rachel walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. You have a choice now. The same choice you just offered me. Be better, or watch everything crumble. She left Amelia sitting in that expensive chair, surrounded by all the things she thought would make her safe. The change was immediate. Amelia retreated into near invisibility, no longer descending the grand staircase at 7 a.m. like a queen ready to destroy someone's day. She took her meals in her room. She stopped summoning staff for invented infractions. The mansion, which had felt like a prison for so long, slowly began to breathe again. A week later, Grace found Rachel in the garden. The older woman's eyes were bright. Her shoulders no longer curved forward in perpetual anticipation of attack. "I don't know what you did," Grace said softly, "but thank you. For the first time in 7 years, I don't feel afraid in this house." A month later, Collins called Rachel into his study. He looked older somehow, but also lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "Amelia has asked for a separation," he said. "She's moving to her family's estate in Philadelphia, though I suspect that's another fiction she's maintained." He paused, meeting Rachel's eyes. "I should have stopped her years ago. You showed me what courage actually looks like." Then he offered Rachel a position managing the Whitemore Charitable Foundation. The salary would allow her to finish her degree and support her mother. She could complete the thesis she'd abandoned, could return to the work she loved. Rachel accepted. That evening, sitting in her small room, soon to be replaced by a proper apartment, Rachel thought about everything that had happened. She'd proven something she'd written about in her thesis, but never fully believed until that moment. Power built on fear is just a house of cards. One strong wind, one moment of courage, and all comes tumbling down. Because bullies, she'd learned, aren't monsters. They're just frightened people hiding behind masks. And when someone finally has the courage to remove that mask, the bully has nothing left. Amelia Whitemore's reign of terror ended not with violence or revenge, but with truth. Rachel Brown, the 28-year-old maid who refused to be broken, did what no one else had dared to do. She looked the monster in the eye and reminded her that she was human after all, just a scared girl from South Boston, wearing a costume that no longer fit. And sometimes that's all it takes. One person brave enough to see through the performance. One person willing to stand up and say, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Because once you see that the emperor has no clothes, the empire of fear collapses, and everyone trapped inside it is finally free. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever stood up to a bully or witnessed someone else's courage change everything? Subscribe to this channel for more powerful true stories about justice, courage, and the strength it takes to stand up for what's right. Remember, courage isn't about being fearless. It's about refusing to be broken. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.